Ejiro Evero will be back as the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator in 2025. Why? Well, I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Panthers podcast. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, because the weekly Friday mailbag is back this Friday. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council. And all off season long on Fridays, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. We talked about this yesterday, as the Carolina Panthers became the all-time worst scoring defense in the history of the NFL, allowing 534 points in the 2024 season. The 1981 Baltimore Colts, 43 years of embarrassment, came to an end on Sunday afternoon in Atlanta as the Panthers' 2024 defense took over the mantle as the worst defense in the history of the National Football League. And when discussing this, I told y'all I had a conversation with someone during the game on Sunday about the status of Ejiro Evero, the Panthers' embattled defensive coordinator, at least on the outside. Inside didn't seem like he was embattled at all, but at least exterior, when looking at the Carolina Panthers, he's embattled. Someone people wanted gone. I told y'all that apparently, according to this person, the Carolina Panthers wanted to keep Ejiro Evero and that they would want to also discuss making some staff changes. And if he potentially balked at that, then maybe he and the staff would be gone after this record-setting in a bad way season for the Carolina Panthers defense. So I prepared all of you who watched and listened to the show for what came on Monday morning, as Panthers head coach Dave Canales said that Ejiro Evero, in fact, will be retained as Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator in 2025. And I understand the numbers, they are bad. And we will go over these numbers one final time here as we enter the offseason. The Panthers went from the fourth best defense in terms of total defense in 2023 to last. They went from the sixth in yards per play allowed to last. They were seventh a year ago in net passing yards allowed per attempt. This past season, they were 31st. They were fourth least penalized defense a year ago. They were the eighth most penalized defense this past season. They were 13th in yards per carry allowed, but gave up the 10th most rushing yards last season. This past season, they were last in both categories. 14th a year ago in third down defense, dead last this year. Allowed opponents to score on 37% of their drives a year ago. That was 22nd in the NFL. Opponents scored on 51.4% of their drives, which was dead last. 28th red zone defense got worse to 29th. 29th scoring defense, as we know, last in the NFL, the worst in the history of the league. They were dead last in turnover percentage a year ago at 5.5. Now that actually improved. They were 26th at 8.6. Dead last in sacks last year with 27. This past season, they were 29th as they got 32 sacks. They were 30th a year ago in pressure percentage at 17.2. They are 2 full percentage points below that at 15.2, which again was last in the NFL. And then looking at some of the advanced metrics, looking at EPA and DVOA, they were 26th and 25th respectively a year ago. This season, 31st in EPA, 32nd in DVOA. By every single metric, this defense was considerably worse than the one that Ejiro Evero coordinated in 2023. So why, given everything that I just put out there, which are facts, Those defensive numbers are facts. That's not an opinion. That's me giving you factual information of how this defense ranked this past season. How and why is he still the defensive coordinator here in Carolina? I'm sure you're asking, and I'm certainly asking, as it is a reasonable question. So why? According to Dave Canales, these are his words about why he's retained Ejiro Evero as his defensive coordinator, saying, quote, "I've played against this defense. I played against it in Seattle with the Rams for a bunch of years. I played against it twice last year. I know what this defense will look like, and I'm committed to that. Ejiro's committed to that. So it's about developing the players we brought in. It's about evaluating our schemes, and it's about seeing who's out there to challenge our roster and who can help us get this defense to the place that we know we can." Dave Canales, for anyone who's been willing to listen, has been telling you all season long this was going to happen. All year long. When asked about the run defense, Dave Canales came out after that first game against Tampa and talked about the players not doing their job, not being connected, how he liked this scheme. Every single time he was asked about Ejiro Evero and the Panthers defense, he always talked about how he loved the scheme, how he had difficulty in the past calling plays last year in Tampa against this scheme, how he had difficulty when he was with Seattle. They had a game plan. It was difficult against this scheme that was utilized back when the Rams had him. Not as their DC, but a part of that staff. Understand that. He continuously sat here and told you he did not want to fire this man. I told you yesterday from the information I was given, he did not want to fire this man. And then we find out on Monday that, in fact, he's not firing this man. But there will likely be staff changes. And I'll tell you the two staff changes to certainly look at: inside linebacker coach Pete Hansen, who's one of Ejiro's buddies, him and Burt Watts, safety coach. Look at those two guys potentially be gone. Those are the two names I can give you, and everybody else will see. I would think Todd Wash, defensive line coach. Defensive line was terrible. Large part why they were terrible was Derek Brown missed 16 games. And that's also another reason why Ejiro Evero is back. And there have been plenty of you who I've interacted with on Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it, who are not upset by this move, that you have brought up the injuries. How could you expect anyone to have success with the injuries the Carolina Panthers have suffered this season, where Derek Brown missed 16 games, Shaq Thompson missed 13, DJ Wooden missed 9, Dane Jackson missed 8, Jordan Ford missed 6, Josie Jewell missed 5, Trevor Wallace missed 4, Jadeveon Clowney missed 3, Shai Tuttle 2, JC Horn 2, Ashawn Robinson 1. Look at all the amount of games. Important players to this defense, to varying talent degrees, missed this past season. But also think about this, Detroit. How many guys have the Lions lost this season? He saw Alex Anzalone miss a bunch of games. He came back last night, made a big impact in that game on Sunday Night Football. Aiden Hutchinson, best player on that defense, still the leader in sacks for that defense. He's gone. They have lost a lot. And look at that masterclass Aaron Glenn put out there on Sunday night to have them wrap up the number 1 seed. And he's going to be a head coach next year. If he's not, what the hell is the NFL doing? Ejiro Evero, I have not seen anyone as of this recording wanting to speak to him for a head coaching role. I would understand that. I mean, I did see once upon a time Mike Vrabel have the worst defense with the Houston Texans and then become the Tennessee Titans coach in the same calendar year. So it's possible, but let's also understand Mike Vrabel playing in the league, other advantages to why he would get a job in the league, like, I don't know, John Robinson, who was the general manager then in Tennessee, having been in New England with him, among other reasons, which you can figure out yourself based off of the history of the league. But Ejiro Evero certainly is probably not deserving of being a head coach. And if it is going to be a results-based business, it can be a meritocracy, I don't think he's merited anything other than probably losing his job. But when you bring up the amount of games that key players missed this season, you get it. Also looking at the defensive talent, something we talked about a week ago when I gave you the case for and against retaining Ejiro Evero as a DC in Carolina this year. They got rid of Brian Burns, and the money, all of that was a big piece of it. And Burns was still one of their best players, maybe the best player on their defense a year ago in the last couple of seasons. He had 8.5 sacks this past year in New York, where the Giants were also terrible. And I didn't watch all the games, so I don't know how the New York media, how the New York Giants fans feel about Brian Burns and the investment that Joe Shane and that front office made when they traded for him and then gave him $30 million a year. But he had 8.5 sacks. Jadeveon Clowney had 5.5. Had him 1 sack on Sunday, so that helped get that total up there. Clowney was never going to reach that total that Burns had last year and that he had a year ago as well. Clowney was not going to be that guy in Carolina. He now has 58 sacks and 11 seasons. Burns has 54.5 and 6. Who's the better player? Obviously, Brian Burns. DJ Wonnum had 4 sacks, 26 pressures in limited action. I do think that's someone who can help this team moving forward. A'Shawn Robinson was far and away the best defensive lineman on a terrible defensive line at a career high 5.5 sacks, only had 7 entering the season. He was a 79th graded interior defensive lineman. No other Panthers defensive lineman was ranked outside of the top 100, or it was not ranked inside the top 100 of PFF interior defensive lineman grades. Josie Jewell, 68th graded linebacker. Frankie Louvu, 34th. Louvu clearly is a better player. I think Josie overall was fine. So like Wonnum, Robinson, Jewell, I think you got what you expected out of them this season, where Dane Jackson never got that, as he was injured with the hamstring when he came back. Got benched for Shaw Smith-Wade, the rookie out of Washington State. Jordan Fuller played on Sunday, but the prior 2 weeks, he was a healthy scratch in favor of Damani Richardson, the UDFA out of Texas A&M, which obviously is a positive development that you find a young guy who can play at safety and likely be the starter there next season in 2025. But Fuller did not help them this year. Nick Scott also was injured at points of times, but also was not healthy and it was not helpful. So the defensive talent was never there. And Shaq Thompson came out here and he was asked about Ejiro Evero. He was asked about the scheme and whether he should come back. And he said this: find ballers and they can fit in any system and make it work. How many of the guys I just mentioned are ballers? How many? 1.5, maybe? Come on, let's be real. They didn't have the talent. Didn't have the talent. They were banged up. But most importantly, Dave Canales is standing by his man. And he told you all year long what he was going to do. You didn't want to listen. You kept saying this is messed up. You kept acting as if you knew better. And, well, here we are. Ejiro Evero is coming back. I can completely understand why you would be upset, and you have every right to feel the way you feel and have the opinion that you have based off of all the numbers I laid out to you earlier in this conversation. But he's coming back, and you got to hope that Carolina goes out there, gets the defensive talent around him. Dan Morgan, who spoke to the media on Monday, we'll talk more about what Dan had to say and the importance of this offseason on tomorrow's show. But he talked about he has a responsibility to get the right players in place for Ejiro Evero's defense to look like what Dave Canales knows it can. So we'll see. This is a big decision that Dave made. If they're terrible again, historically bad again next season, and the Panthers go out there and have Bryce Young play the way that he played in the final 9 weeks of the season, and they fail to reach the playoffs in large part because of the defense, and I'm not putting playoff expectations on the Panthers here on Monday, January 6th, as I record this at 5:16 Eastern Standard Time. I'm not putting those playoff expectations. But if the offense continues to improve, Bryce continues to play the way he's played, and the defense is holding them back, then yeah, maybe in this division, it would be the defense. That's the reason in retaining Ejiro Evero. Possibly that's the reason why the Panthers fall short of the goals that they set for themselves and really maybe what their potential could have been had they decided to move on from Ejiro. So he's not going anywhere. Robert Saleh, that pipe dream is now over officially, and it's unfortunate, but this is what the Panthers are going to do. It's what Dave's going to do, and it will potentially be a defining decision in his young career here in Carolina. So we'll talk more about that throughout the offseason as I'll go through the defense, how they can get better at each position, potential players that they can target in free agency, do that over the next couple of weeks here on the show. But Ejiro Evero is coming back, and Dave Canales is standing by his man. Bryce Young is also coming back, and he is going to be their starting quarterback, possibly beyond, as it looks like he finally has proven that he is the franchise here in Carolina. We'll talk about Bryce Young's season and look at the final numbers and where things are headed after this in just a moment on the Locked On Panthers. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play or to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for Locked On Panther listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. At a certain point this past season, you would have thought that both Ejiro Evero and Bryce Young would not be a part of the Carolina Panthers in 2025. And what do you know? They both will be a part of the Carolina Panthers in 2025. One of them, Ejiro, someone that I don't think a lot of people are excited to see back. But another one, Bryce Young, certainly I think the entire fan base should be happy about him returning and rooting for his success moving forward as he prove doubters like me wrong. And hey, I apologize yesterday, hand up. I should not have been out on Bryce Young as quickly as I was, as the Panthers had 15 more games left in the season, reasonably considering how bad the defense had already proven to be. He was going to get an opportunity. And also looking at Andy Dalton and his recent track record, Bryce Young was getting another opportunity. So that's on me. I apologize. I got it wrong. I'm willing to admit when I get things wrong here on the show. Never say that I'm not willing to admit that, but I'm happy for the guy. Happy that he's coming back next season, that it looks like he's going to be their franchise quarterback. And when asked about that on Monday, about Bryce Young being the franchise, Dave Canales said, absolutely. Bryce is going to be our starter moving forward. He earned that. He won that job, and he took it and ran with it. And that's exactly what you wanted to see once he was reinserted into the lineup. Now, it was really Dave Canales going kicking and screaming to go out and do it. Not really, as Andy Dalton was set to be the starter against Denver. The car accident, we all know what led to Bryce going in there. But it took a while for Dave to actually admit that Bryce would keep the job for the rest of the season. He kept taking it week to week, wanted to see what he looked like against New Orleans, wanted to see what he looked like in Munich against the Giants. And he came out and said after that win, the back-to-back wins, that Bryce is showing us something. And after that close call against Kansas City, finally, it was then he said, yeah, Bryce is our guy. After the conversation that Bryce had in the locker room with those players, and Bryce was asked about this. We talked about this yesterday. We talked about it a couple times in the past, just how instrumental Andy Dalton coming in showing Bryce how to conduct yourself as a starting quarterback, as a franchise quarterback in the NFL, and how to lead these grown men. That was huge for him. And having Bryce have that speech, show the personality, be himself, look like he's having fun. And that's been really the beautiful thing about it, is just how much fun he's had. He didn't look like he had fun last year outside of the win against Atlanta and the win against Houston. Didn't look like he had fun week 1 and week 2 against New Orleans and against the Chargers. Since week 9, he's looked like he's had a ball. He's had the time of his life. He's looked like Alabama Bryce, which I'm happy for him. Truly am. When you look at the final numbers this season, they're not impressive when you look at just the numbers in totality. 2,403 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. You look at success rate, that was only 39%, which was 35th in the NFL. League average was 45.8. So at a minimum, you want him to be right there around league average next season as he continues to improve. And I don't have the numbers of what it looked like as far as success rate from week 8, week 9 on. I imagine he's probably pretty close to league average. But you look at touchdown percentage, 3.9. That was 24th in the NFL. League average was 4.5. Again, maybe it was close to that once he came back into the lineup. Again, don't have those numbers in front of me, or just, I guess, access to it as far as, spending the money on a lot of these things. He's ranked 22nd in EPA, 20th in QBR, 17th in points contributed by a quarterback this season. PFF does have a breakdown of the numbers since Bryce Young was inserted again as the starting quarterback. Since returning in week 8 on the road in Denver. Bryce Young has the 6th highest passing grade among quarterbacks in the NFL behind Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Jared Goff. Justin Herbert is in the playoffs, got an opportunity to go out there and give his team a chance to advance deep in the playoffs. I don't think the Chargers are necessarily going to do that, but they got an opportunity. He's a great quarterback. Jim Harbaugh knows what the hell he's doing as a head coach. The Chargers got a chance. Joe Burrow, going to be comeback player of the year. There's an argument that he should be the MVP for what he did this past season in Cincinnati. Lamar Jackson, he's been outstanding. Argument he should be an MVP for the 3rd time. Josh Allen, I do think, will be the MVP this season, and a great opportunity for Buffalo if they can go to Kansas City and win an Arrowhead to go to the Super Bowl and potentially win it this year. Then Jared Goff, the team that I'm hoping wins the Super Bowl 15-2, who has been the best team all year long, overcoming those injuries of Detroit Lions. Those are the quarterbacks that have been better than Bryce Young since week 8. So to be right there in that company, just going over where those guys are in terms of MVP expectations, Super Bowl expectations, that's what you wanted. That's exactly what you wanted. And then when David Tepper went up there at Bank of America Stadium on draft night and talked to the crowd, he said that Bryce Young, of the quarterbacks available in that draft class, CJ Stroud is available, Will Levis was available, Anthony Richardson was available. Bryce Young, gave the Panthers the best opportunity to not win a Super Bowl, but to win Super Bowls. And based off of looking at that list and what he did this season in the final 9 weeks, or final 10 weeks rather, it's kind of hard to argue, because Herbert's not in this conference. Neither is Burrow. Neither is Jackson. Neither is Allen. Jared Goff is. So the only other NFC quarterback who played better than Bryce Young since week 8 was Jared Goff. Okay, that's a good thing. Look at big-time throws. He's tied for the most with Joe Burrow with 26. He had only 9 turnover-worthy plays, which is not a ton at all. And you watch the games. It wasn't like Bryce was putting the ball in harm's way most times, except for that game against Dallas. Other than that, he took care of the football. Average depth of target was 9.3. That was the 5th in the NFL during that period of time. He has 73.4 adjusted completion percentage, which was 22nd. So certainly would like for that to improve. And think about this too. Bryce Young, small in stature, small in size. And we saw in the past with Baker Mayfield, who has been great the last couple of years in Tampa. And I truly am happy how things have worked out for Baker outside of Carolina. Would have loved for it to work here. He was never put in a position to succeed. Let's be honest here about what really happened when it came to Baker Mayfield coming to Carolina a couple of years ago in the faux quarterback competition and all of that. 0 batted passes for Bryce Young. We saw a ton with Baker. 0 for Bryce Young. So it's not about the height, it's about being on time, getting the ball out when you need to, and Bryce Young has not had that issue. So I just want to point that out. I found that to be something that was interesting. And, of course, not really anything that we've noticed during his time playing in Carolina the past 2 seasons. So Bryce Young, absolutely, according to Dave Canales, he's going to be their starting quarterback moving forward, that he earned the job, that he won it, he took it, and he ran with it. And he's running here into 2025 as Panthers starting quarterback, which will be a very big season for Bryce, as next year, in May, the Carolina Panthers are going to have to make a decision to exercise 5th-year option or not. And, maybe even before that in March, decide, let's give this guy a mega extension. So big year for Bryce Young coming up, big year, big offseason for the Carolina Panthers here the rest of the way as we start things off here in early January. Locker room cleanout day was on the Monday. Adam Thielen, Austin Corbett, Miles Sanders, and Shaq Thompson, along all the other players speaking to the media. Got a couple of takeaways from what those 4 had to say here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a Zach Bryan concert last year. The energy and excitement was unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Locker room cleanout was on Monday, and it's always a sad day to see the season end. I don't know, the last couple of years obviously have not yielded the kind of results that a lot of people would have hoped for, as Carolina Panthers have missed the playoffs. All those seasons have not been since 2017. And I think after Sunday, the way that Bryce played, the way the Carolina Panthers played as a team, outside of obviously like the Dallas game wasn't great game a week ago against Tampa, was not ideal, but how they played against Kansas City, who has played everybody closely. I understand that, but they still, in games they tried to win, have only lost one game so far this season. Carolina played Philadelphia close. They could end up being Super Bowl champions this season as well. Tampa, the first time they have gone out there, and they have been a completely different team in the final 9 games of this season in 2024. And that gives you hope. And really, the hope is in the quarterback, but they got a lot to figure out over the coming weeks and months as they try to rebuild this roster, get into a spot where they can contend next year in the NFC South and possibly in the NFC as a whole. I don't think teams like the Packers are going anywhere. Jordan Love and Carolina ended up being third in the NFC South. I don't know how the tiebreakers worked out, but that's how it worked out to where they will go to Lambeau Field. And I told y'all a couple weeks ago, like, I would love to go to Lambeau, and I think I will try to make that happen depending on how the schedule works out for this upcoming year. Hopefully it's not in December, of course, but we'll see. But they got that game going on. There's going to be plenty of teams like Detroit. I don't think they're going anywhere. Minnesota, we'll see what they decide to do with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. Philadelphia, I think they should still be good. Dallas will be good enough when they have Dak Prescott back. So there's still going to be competition to really ascend to the top of the NFC. San Francisco as well. When they're healthy, they're going to be pretty doggone good. So Carolina, just looking at this little small pocket of the NFC South, it's possible that they're not that far away maybe from contending, but they got a long way to go defensively to get that defense where it needs to be. And even offensively, plenty of questions on the offensive line about how they're going to construct that. Plenty of questions about the targets they're going to have the upcoming season. And speaking of that, Adam Thielen, he spoke to the media on Monday, and he said that he is contemplating retirement, which I do think caught some people off guard. This past season, he was the 30th graded wide receiver according to PFF, 48 receptions, 615 yards, 5 touchdowns, despite missing 7 games. And just doing my own projections by looking at the games that he played, his numbers right there, 81 receptions, potentially 1,000 yards again, 8 touchdowns had he been healthy for a full season. And that doesn't put in who was available at certain times and Deontay Johnson, all that. But still, at least the numbers he put up, that could have been what he could have done potentially had he stayed healthy. Either way, Adam Thielen has been an excellent acquisition for the Panthers the past 2 seasons, what he's been able to do, helping Bryce Young along the way. Now, didn't help Bryce Young week 2 with the whole sideline freak out, which I do think, as Dave Canales said, he talked about it, didn't really want to rehash the whole decision to move on from Bryce at that point in time as far as benching him, but he did say he did what was right for the Carolina Panthers. And it's hard to argue the way how things have played out, but also back then that it was not the right thing for the Carolina Panthers to sit Bryce Young when Adam Thielen, of all people, is having a mental breakdown on the sideline. And God love him, because they worked too hard for things to be as bad as they were the first 2 weeks of this year. And he said that he's going to take a couple weeks, take 2 or 3 weeks with his family, see where his body's at, how it feels, and then make a decision. He already has the plan of what steps he'd take if he decides to retire, and he's just going to take some time, breathe, and then they'll figure it out. And he said he's gone through this process the last couple of years. He went through it last year, which I know he talked about, at least during locker room cleanout day, that he came here with Frank Reich, and they had sold him on the vision of building off of the 7-10 season. And that's finished, the 500 finish that Steve Wilkes had, and trying to get really close to going back and winning division in 2023. And of course, well, they went 2-15. They were very much not close to winning division in the NFC South a year ago. And maybe he was going to get traded. Ended up not getting traded, stuck around, had another good year. Of course, missed time because of a hamstring. So he's gone through the process. I didn't let us know last year, but he let us know this year that he's been doing it since he left Minnesota. His last year in Minnesota, before he was coming to Carolina, he was thinking, do I want to retire? So we'll see what he decides to do. But Adam Thielen, I would love to have him back. I think it would make sense for Carolina. It's not really cost prohibitive to bring him back next year. It's like an $8 million cap hit. They can save like $3 million if they decide to cut him pre-June 1. It's $5 million dead cap if they do that. I would want to bring back Adam Thielen, but they got to bring in more receivers. And we're going to talk more about this as I got a plan as far as how I want to go over each position group here over really the next month heading into February as well as we get closer to decisions being made about the roster. Austin Corbett. The hope was he was going to be the starting center this year, that he was going to be able to help Bryce move along, that he could fill that position that has been a revolving door since Ryan Khalil. Wow, my bad. Ryan Khalil. Matt Khalil. We don't ever want to think about what happened here. But Ryan Khalil left Carolina. It's Matt Paradis, who was good for a year, but the other two wasn't great. Had torn ACL. That was done for him. Pat Elflein was never great at that position. Bradley Bozeman was good until he wasn't good with all the issues, the carnage on the offensive line a year ago. This was the opportunity potentially of Austin Corbett, who was great for them when he came in, playing next to Bozeman at right guard, played and started in every single game. Tore his ACL, came back last season, played right guard, got hurt again. Then they want to move him to center. He hadn't really done it since I think it was like OTA or something again with the Rams his last year there before moving over to right guard, where that season the Rams won the Super Bowl. So it was going to be a challenge to see how he performed, but overall he was solid for them when he was in there. And looking at it, he played and started in 5 games, 4.5, really. That's what he said before tearing his bicep there on the road in Chicago in that game. And he's told us that the Panthers did not give him any indication on whether he'll be back or not. He's going to take time. The team's going to take time. They got to evaluate what their options are. And you look at it, the last 2 seasons, he's only played in 9 games. He had not missed a start in the previous 3. His last 2 years in LA, didn't miss any time. His first year in Carolina, as I stated, didn't miss any time. Played every single snap until he tore his ACL in that Week 18 road win against New Orleans. He had been healthy, but recently has not been healthy. And you look at it, he has a void year because he's a free agent, but he has a void year left as they restructure his deal, I believe, either last season or the season prior, something that Carolina was notorious for doing. And that void year is $7.7 million in cap hit. So if they extend him, they can get rid of that cap hit. They can at least change what it would be for 2025. And you understand, too, Cade Mays, who they cut, then re-signed off of the Giants practice squad. He came and started 8 games of the season. And he is a restricted free agent, which means that his RFA tender is $3.185 million, a lot cheaper than whatever the Carolina Panthers would have to pay Austin Corbett to come back to be their center. Also, he's a younger player. And if you look at PFF, he was the best center the Panthers had this year. He was 17th highest graded center in the NFL. Brady Christensen, 24th, and Austin Corbett, 28th. So Corbett, just according to PFF, which is just one way to look at it. I am not going to sit here and tell you I'm an offensive line expert. I can tell you about the techniques and the nuances of playing that position. I cannot tell you that. But looking at that, Cade Mays was their best one. And Cade Mays also will be the cheapest of those 3 options of Christensen, Corbett, and himself. So we'll see if Austin Corbett comes back next year. I'm thinking based off of that, probably not. But they got to get the best guy. Also think about the long term, and we'll see how it plays out. Miles Sanders, I really do applaud the dude for the way he played on Sunday in Atlanta. It's been a tough 2 years for him in Carolina. He came in to be that lead back coming off for a Pro Bowl season up in Philly, going to the Super Bowl, losing that game to Kansas City. And I thought that he was going to come in and be awesome for Carolina, teaming back up with Deuce Staley, who had been his running back coach there once upon a time in Philly. Obviously, Frank Reich was up there as well once upon a time. And I thought it was going to work. It didn't work. He had the groin injury back during training camp of the 2023 season, was really never the back that we had hoped he would be in Carolina. And he lost his job midway to Chuba Hubbard. Then coming into the season, Chuba was clearly the guy. They drafted Jonathan Brooks. They went out there and signed guys like Rashad Penny, who people are like, oh, look, they're replacing Miles Sanders. I told you, Penny can't play. And as we saw, Penny was wildly out of shape and retired. And this is not to denigrate Rashad Penny, just I saw with my own eyes. So Miles Sanders, didn't work for him. Got hurt again. But then on Sunday, we finally saw that back that he could have been. 17 carries, 66 yards, touchdown, had 3 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown versus Atlanta, 116 yards, total offense, 2 touchdowns. Like, that was the guy that Carolina was hoping they were going to get. So it's unfortunate that his career in Carolina started on the road in Atlanta and is likely going to end on the road in Atlanta. You look at his cap hit next year, $8.175 million dead money if they want to cut him. Pre-June 1 is 2.95, and a cap savings would be 5.2. $1 million roster bonus is important to add. He got a $2 million roster bonus last year. Carolina really didn't have any recourse to get rid of him, as they were going to lose $2 million plus against salary cap had they decided to cut him. But they could not do that because they basically had to just keep him on the roster. And it made sense because they didn't have Jonathan Brooks, and that was even before they even drafted Jonathan Brooks. But as far as things go here, that $1 million roster bonus is going to be pretty cost prohibitive for a player who is not your top back and has not been your top back in these past 2 seasons. So I'm guessing he'll be cut. And think about this, Chuba Hubbard signed a new deal. His cap hit next year is 5.5. Sanders, again, is 8.1. Jonathan Brooks, who may miss the entire 2025 season's cap hit, is 1.9. Miles Sanders' cap hit is larger than those two players together, and those two guys, when healthy, are your top 2 backs. But Brooks is not healthy, so there's an argument to be made that Miles Sanders should be kept around as he's a veteran presence. He can clearly still play when healthy and given the opportunity, but I have a hard time believing they want to give him $1 million roster bonus on the 3rd day of the new league year coming up here in March. Shaq Thompson, he could also be out the door in Carolina, tore his Achilles, which just devastating injury for Shaq as a guy who wants to end his career in Carolina. He said as much again. And he also said the 2 injuries he's had the last 2 years are fluky. He had the broken leg where he just got fallen on. Someone fell on him, which that happens every Sunday in the NFL. And that one, it happened to just snap his leg, which sucks. Brutal injury, came back, was playing solid football, then goes out there, tears Achilles, and knew right away that's what it was. And I'd hate to see it happen to him. But you think about it, like he's played 6 games the last 2 seasons, missing 28 games. He had only missed 13 games total in his first 8 years of his career. So it's not like this is a guy who's been injury plagued. I would love for him to come back, would love for that to work out. He believes he has 3 to 4 years left in him. I just look at the situation that they have here. Trevin Wallace has shown enough to be the starter again next year. They drafted Trevin Wallace. Go back to what I quoted from Dave Canales earlier today on the show. Dave talking about they got to develop the guys that they brought in. And one of the guys they brought in was Trevin Wallace. So develop him, focus on what he can do for you in the future. And same thing, like Josie Jewell, he came in here, knows the scheme. With Ejiro, was with him in Denver. Once he came back from injury, he was pretty solid. And, of course, missed the last 2 weeks of the season. I think that those are your 2 starting linebackers next year. Now, is it the best starting linebacker core you can have? I don't know. But Wallace is going to be a starter for sure, and we'll see what they decide to do with Jewell. Maybe Shaq gets an opportunity. He wants to finish his career in Carolina, wants to be a guy who played for one team. I don't know what that's going to look like. And I don't know what his market's going to look like. That's an important thing to understand as well. Because a couple of years ago, when they were trying to figure out whether they were going to cut him or not, and they gave him that new deal, like it wasn't like his market was robust. And coming off of the broken leg and Achilles, I don't imagine his market's going to be robust either once March rolls around. So the Panthers could potentially get him on the cheap if they do want to bring back Shaq Thompson, who is, of course, one of the team captains and a guy who's homegrown and Dan Morgan can relate to, obviously, having played linebacker. So we'll see what happens. But those are a couple of guys who I want to talk about here on the show after Locker Room Cleanout Day on Monday. And again, I got a plan going over every single position group here in Carolina, much like what I do in the summer when previewing the season. I want to review/preview what's to come this offseason and how the Carolina Panthers should attack each of those position groups once the new league year rolls around here later on in March. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. We're on Friday. I almost said Wednesday, but then I said Monday. Friday, the weekly Friday mailbag is back here on the show. So either at me or DM me to get those questions in for Friday's show. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And on tomorrow's show, didn't talk about Dan Morgan today. We'll talk about Dan Morgan, what he had to say on Monday, and talk about this important offseason the Carolina Panthers are about to embark upon here on Locked On Panthers.